please, come along. Let's see what makes it tick. Best place to start is probably with Gordon Freeman. Alright, PhD. Here, you do not just step into Gordon's shoes, you step into his entire protective suit. And this time, you are no ordinary scientist. You are a living legend. I say this time because, as the title suggests, you have been Gordon before, way back, in the original Half-Life. Whether or not you played the first installment, this game quickly establishes who you are, mostly through friendly NPCs commenting on you.
Gordon Freeman will be driving it.
Basically, a legendary figure. Once a scientist, now a hero. You survived the Black Mesa incident and fought off an alien invasion, before disappearing. Now you're back, a renewed sign of hope that maybe, just maybe, the tides will turn against the oppressors of this struggling world. And from the very start, the pressure is intense. You feel this driving need to help those suffering under the technologically advanced heel of the enemy. It feels almost impossible, an overwhelming task, if you were alone. But alone you are not. New companions and familiar allies stand beside you, along with the oppressed, who have been waiting for the right man in the wrong place to ignite their rebellion, waiting for a hero to follow. And that is one of the game's small but important achievements, making you feel like a hero. You start small, helping a few strangers before disaster strikes, avenging those you could not save in time. And as you press forward, the stakes rise, lives depend on you, challenges intensify, and each victory lands a more devastating blow against the enemy, leading up to the destruction of their central stronghold in the city. You literally start by wading through putrid sewers and fight your way to the top of their dark fortress. It is a true hero's journey. Or rather, I should say a silent hero's journey. This is another excellent choice by the developers. They gave Gordon no voice. Instead, you become his voice, creating a deeply immersive experience. Gordon doesn't respond. He doesn't make decisions or offer commentary. You do. By not hearing Gordon's words or the sound of his voice, you form a stronger connection to the world around you, to the characters you meet, and to the unfolding events. People do not talk to Gordon Freeman, they talk to you as Gordon Freeman. And almost miraculously, the game makes those interactions feel natural.
I understand if you don't wish to discuss this in front of your friends. I'll send them on their way and then we can talk openly.
I say miraculously, as this could have easily turned into the world's worst blank stare simulator. Why? Because there is a story here. There is exposition dialogue, there are tense narrative moments and new things to learn from others. And famously in Half-Life, you remain in control of Gordon's movement and of what he pays attention to. There are no cutscenes, no camera angles that force your attention, no sudden blackout while the game performs for you. You are always the one moving, always the one deciding what to look at. And with a silent protagonist, things could get awkward and break the immersion. This is where Valve's masterfully crafted scripted events and dialogue become essential. They made sure the game avoids any potential awkwardness by carefully scripting how people talk to you as Gordon. There are obvious measures, like avoiding direct questions aimed at you,
Barney, what do you intend?
I'm thinking.
and most exposition occurring between other characters while you are present.
That's right, Barney. This is a red letter day.
But there are also smaller details, like people commenting on your actions, big or small,
Cut it out.
or someone giving a wink, smirk, or nod while talking to others, or characters behaving as if you are still listening when you linger in a scene.
Go on, get in there.
The game gives you just enough guidance to stay engaged while still allowing you full control. I mean, sure, you can break your immersion if you really want to, stand on people's heads or toss a grenade into a crowd. But if you let yourself play the part of Gordon, it all works remarkably well. Here, every decision, every action, every bullet fired and every path taken feels like your own. In Half-Life, Gordon's silence is not an absence, it's an invitation. Apart from your thoughts and voice, you can fill in your own canon if you want to. Now, what do I mean by that? See, when I first played Half-Life, just a young scientist with wide eyes, I could not understand why Gordon was silent, so I started asking questions. Do I have no tongue? Why am I not responding, not commenting like in other games? The only sound my Gordon seemed to make, which is basically the sound we all make, was that startled hissing when I stepped into a fire. But as I played through the game, again and again, and not only the second one, but the first Half-Life as well, it started to dawn on me, and I began to formulate my own answers. See, to me, all the horrors that struck my colleagues in Half-Life 1, all the death and suffering, and the ruin that overtook the planet in its sequel, just all of it, felt like my fault. I did it unintentionally, of course, but I was the one who triggered the resonance cascade by pushing that cursed sample in. I was the one who opened the doors for the hostile aliens into Black Mesa. And I was the one who killed Nylanth, and in the process alerting the Combine to Earth's existence, paving the way for them to conquer it, and in a mere 7 hours. So to me, Gordon's silence became more than just an oddity. It became the silence of trauma. After all he witnessed, all the destruction and horrors, his voice was swallowed by the weight of guilt and sorrow. And even though Gordon's trying to help now, to fight back, to rebuild, he carries that immense burden wordlessly. Okay, even though this was a little too depressing, it was just my theory. And the point is, it sparked something within me. By leaving Gordon silent, the game invited me into his story, put me into his suit, and compelled me to explore these questions for myself. And of course, you can explore these questions in your own way. Perhaps your Gordon is a badass who doesn't need to speak. Or maybe he's simply an introvert who doesn't want to speak. You bring your own interpretation, and the game can feel different for you, even if the story and structure is the same for everyone. This is something many other games in the genre do not offer, the ability to bring your own valid interpretation to a small but vital part. But do not get me wrong, I'm not saying that having a silent protagonist is the best option for every game. It is not. For example, I remember when the first Mass Effect released, how amazing it was that it featured a fully voiced player character across every line of dialogue.
Bang, okay?
In a large RPG like that, with massive branching dialogue trees, cinematic conversations, and a great deal of missable content, it was quite an impressive undertaking at the time. And though Mass Effect was not the first game to attempt this,
Ever heard the name Alex D?
it was the one that basically redefined what talking to people in an RPG could feel like, setting the bar pretty high for others to follow.
I get the feeling you want to ask me something, Commander.
But in those games where your character is fully or even partially voiced, there is something getting between you and the overall experience. And this is not a bad thing if a game has a mostly character-driven narrative. However, it also means that the game plays more like an interactive movie than an actual video game, especially nowadays. But what Valve intended with Half-Life and Half-Life 2, as old-school gamers they are, is a more world-driven narrative. where you truly feel like a part of it. Where you are not just watching events unfold, you are standing in the middle of them. And because Gordon doesn't speak, and is basically an empty vessel you inhabit with your inner voice, sometimes even outer, well, that amplifies your connection to those events. Now, Half-Life isn't, of course, the only FPS game to have a silent hero, and even though there are some strong contenders, I think this is the series that managed to do it the best. We already touched a little on why it works so well here, but it might become clearer when we compare it to another mute protagonist who doesn't work quite as well. And before I continue, let me be clear. I love the Far Cry series. They are some of my favorite first-person shooters, and Far Cry 5 is my favorite one. Yeah, sorry Vas.
Shut the up!
But here, the voiceless deputy, well, let's just say it doesn't work that well. In Half-Life 2, Valve paid great attention to refining the scripted events, dialogue, and narrative moments, all while leaving Gordon fully under your control. And as mentioned, it all serves one goal: creating a deeply immersive, world-driven experience. Far Cry 5 takes a different approach, building its story around cinematic presentation. Cutscenes and interactive cutscenes are frequent, and they are filled with emotional exchanges and quiet moments aimed, of course, right at you. The problem is that once control is taken away and you stop actively participating and are basically forced to watch, your hero is still not part of the conversation. The characters talk at the deputy, not with him. They pour out their feelings and the hero just stares blankly. Plus, the locked first-person view only makes it worse.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first?
It feels like watching a movie where everyone's talking to a prop instead of a protagonist. The game occasionally tries to make you feel involved, like when you raise a glass or gesture during a scene, but it never bridges that gap. If the hero had a voice, like in Far Cry 3,
You put the quit.
it would probably work better. Sure, you'd lose a bit of immersion, but at least the dialogue wouldn't feel so staged and monologue-y. Is that a word? I don't think it's a word. You know what I mean. And there'd be some life to the cutscenes.
Boring!
It would also better match the action movie energy the game keeps chasing. The cutscenes without the deputy's voice just feel hollow. And you might say that this also happens in Half-Life 2. Gordon gets captured and is forced to just sit tight, so to speak, with nothing to do but look around. Technically, it's not a cutscene, but it serves the same purpose. The whole sequence here feels a lot like the ones in Far Cry 5. But there are two big differences that make this work. Firstly, Half-Life only takes control away when absolutely necessary. At the beginning, at the end, or here. Moments like this are rare. They are not overdone. And secondly, the dialogue feels natural and grounded. In contrast, in Far Cry 5, the dialogue often comes across as overly dramatic and unnatural. There are just too many of those close-up conversations, and since you have no or extremely limited control during them, while your hero remains silent, they end up feeling stiff and detached rather than immersive. Still, this small flaw is a far cry from a serious fault, and I love revisiting this entry all the same. But I hope this comparison clarified why it works and how it works so much better in Half-Life 2. That's what makes Half-Life series, and especially the second entry, stand out from other FPS games. Gordon's silence isn't a gimmick or a shortcut. It's a design choice that trusts you to fill that quiet space with your own thoughts and reactions, without forcing them on you or turning Gordon into an empty prop. That trust is rare, and it only works when the designers know exactly what they're doing. Fortunately, Valve did, and they turned what could have been a limitation into something more. A chance for each of us to become our own Gordon, our own silent hero. conquered Earth, decimated Europe, and a city by the edge of the sea, where the Combine decided to build their monument to enslavement, the Citadel. The entire game unfolds in and around City 17, yet its vistas never grow dull or repetitive. Your journey takes you from the radioactive canals that snake through the city to forsaken suburbs where people sought haven, only to find horrors beyond imagining. It leads you along desolate coastlines, where your only companion is the soft, lonely whistle of the wind. And finally, you find yourself fighting in the very streets of City 17 itself, before your path plunges you into the technological nightmare that is the Citadel. A thick, oppressive atmosphere clings to you throughout the entire experience. And on top of that, the game often conveys just how small you are against the vastness of the alien overlords. And when I say it conveys, I do not mean through idle chatter about enemy numbers or the power of their weapons. Instead, it lets you witness firsthand the enemy's overwhelming advantage and technological supremacy, and it lets you see that those they cannot control, they destroy. And even though the game is interactive visual medium, it follows the same rule all good movies do, as often as it can. Show, do not tell. An excellent example of what I mean unfolds right at the start of your journey. It's just one quick scene, but so many things are expertly presented. You are running from enemy soldiers through a dim attic led by a fellow citizen who holds the door shut. The enemy pounding on the other side. He urges you to keep running, never to look back. So you do, and just as you near the end of the attic, gunshots ring out behind you. You know what has happened, but you press on, across the rooftops. And when you reach higher grounds, an ominous sound echoes from behind. Instinctively, you turn, and there it is, a sight that speaks volumes. You see a monstrous flying hybrid creature and the towering, menacing structure that rises impossibly high. A creation beyond human hands, for sure. This is what I mean. The game neatly shows you firsthand, and in a chase scene nonetheless, what stands against you. And this scene is not the only one, and not even the first to help you understand where you and the entire humanity stand in this world. From your first steps off the train, the game starts showing you who holds the power, who is crushed under it, and that some rebellious flickers exist. And it does all of this without an exposition dump. You are in control the whole time, taking it in at your own pace. But I chose this scene to highlight because it's the... Hold on, let me check the dictionary to make sure it's the right word. Yep, the epitome of all the show don't tell moments. It sends you off on your rebellious journey perfectly and shows you all the main pieces. The oppressed humanity and the rebellious flickers, and the scale of the enemy threat. Immediate in the form of soldiers, scanners and ships, and the force behind it all in the form of the towering Citadel, which, by the way, feels like a character in its own right. It's visible from nearly every corner of the city, and it emits this omnipresent gaze, watching your every step. And the Citadel is not the only thing watching you along the way. The G-Man, another character returning from the first game, can be spotted in almost every chapter, often lurking in corners of the city. He seems to be ensuring that you are exactly where he wants you, deepening the game's mysterious element. And I love that you can miss a lot of these G-Man sightings. I remember how excited I was when I found a new one back in the day. You know, when the game was new and not every little secret or feature was on YouTube. Anyway, the G-Man isn't the only thing you can miss. Apart from those great environmental storytelling moments that are right in front of you, because, well, the game follows a fairly linear path, there are a lot of nice and often hidden details and scenes that make the world more intriguing. Let me highlight a couple for you now. Throughout your journey, you will often spot the Lambda symbol, painted defiantly on walls as a mark of the rebellion. If you choose to investigate, you will always find supplies to aid you, though often accompanied by the grim remnants of the rebels who stashed them. At one point, a fellow rebel even throws you supplies as he sees you approaching, guiding and assisting you. It's just a small game mechanic. The supplies, ammunition and health packs, But the game builds something more from it, which you can choose to explore. The game tries not to treat this detail, the supplies, like just another item to grab. It handles them like people in this situation would, leaving them where they can and helping out when they can, making the world feel lived in and more believable. It is not always this subtle, but it tries, and it is appreciated. Then there's the legendary hidden singing Vortigaunt, a member of the alien race that stands with you this time. Concealed behind an open sewer grate, past a pool of toxic sludge, he awaits, reciting events from the first game with a hint of mystery.
We are coterminous.
He adds nothing to the main story, but he is there, whether you seek him out or not. And why is he here? Is he refusing to fight, or is this just his favorite hiding spot? Perhaps both. It's just a fun little reward for curiosity, a moment to pause and smile, but it makes the world feel richer for it. Details like this may not drive the story forward, but they deepen the feelings and atmosphere of Half-Life 2. And there are even smaller things. One of these smaller things appear in the form of a seagull. When you first mount your trusty buggy, ready to ride, you might find yourself drawn to explore a nearby house. You park and step away for a moment, and when you return, a seagull or two take flight from your buggy, leaving behind a familiar mess as their parting gift. It's just a tiny detail noticed by only a small percentage of players, but that is precisely its charm. This small, spontaneous moment appearing solely in this chapter feels unscripted, alive, and therefore, well, real. Whenever you are, sir or man, who made sure the bird crap is in the game, thank you. Oh, and if you're wondering, yes, you can kill the seagulls if you feel the need for revenge. Continuing with an example of a great world-building scene you can choose to witness, this one awaits at the end of your buggy adventure. A fellow rebel warns you that the enemy is searching for your vehicle, urging you to hide it in a nearby garage. After a quick battle, you part ways, leaving your car in their care and moving onward, scaling the cliffs. And just as you are about to leave, you catch a final glimpse. A combine carrier lifts your buggy away. Why did the enemy seize it if you will never see it again? Do they plan to study it? Or are they simply ensuring you will never speed across their terrain again? The first time I observed this, I remember clearly aiming my rocket launcher at the carrier in a burst of defiance, thinking, if I cannot have it, then the enemy shall not have it either. Sadly, my 3 measly rockets were not enough to destroy it. Yet again, the game encourages you to ask questions, and these questions do not frustrate me, they intrigue me, as I hope they intrigue you. They make us pause, wonder, and imagine scenarios beyond what the game explicitly shows, creating the sensation that the world is bigger than what we see on screen. And for a linear first-person shooter game you can finish relatively quickly, that is a win in my book. See, over the last couple of decades, a lot of first-person shooters swapped environmental storytelling for cinematic presentation, trusting players with control for emotionally charged scripted scenes, and genuine exploration for heavily guided direction. And all this is not necessarily a bad thing. Some of my favorite games use all 3 aspects. It depends on how they are handled. But I think the swap often comes at a cost of world believability. Let me give you a specific example of what I mean. I remember when I first played BioShock Infinite. I really liked it. I remember Elizabeth, the vibrant style, the great opening, the fun gameplay, the ridiculous story beats, and the first breathtaking sight of Columbia.
Hallelujah.
But I also remember how the world felt after a moment. It felt, well, too staged. Like it was built for me to just pass through, finish the story, and nothing more. It looks alive, sure, but only on the path right in front of you. The world can be full of motion and sound, but ironically, it feels much more empty than the desolate outskirts of City 17. As I mentioned, what makes a video game world feel believable is when it suggests a life beyond the player's momentary presence. There are a lot of tools for this, like random encounters, complex NPC routines, the world reacting to your actions, details that exist even if a player never finds them, and more. And when you first step into Columbia, into the tutorial level, everything seems fine and lively.
Those are vigors!
But the illusion collapses as soon as the shooting starts, when the crowds vanish and the streets go silent. Suddenly, the city doesn't feel like a place anymore. It feels like a string of empty areas waiting to be cleared. Everything that felt alive is revealed to be just a backdrop or an exhibit for you to shoot through. And so after I finished the game, I knew I was never going to play it again. And not because it was bad. I mean, sure, it has its flaws, but the gameplay is really fun. And I enjoyed the style of it all. But it's not enough to make me return. Because once that initial awe fades, there's nothing beyond the main story path. No discoveries unrelated to the main narrative, no real interactions, no place worth exploring twice. I mean, you can hunt for voxophones and upgrades, sure. They're useful enough on a gameplay level, but they do not make the world feel deeper or more interesting to explore. Even when you compare it to Bioshock 1, Rapture felt fantastical, sure, but lived in, coherent, immersive, full of details that helped to make it believable. Columbia looks fantastic, but feels like a hollow model of a city. Great at first glance, but empty once you start looking around. And that's one of the reasons why I love returning to the world of Half-Life 2. It uses all the right ingredients and it trusts me to explore and discover on my own. The environmental storytelling and all those small details and scenes make City 17 memorable. They make us stop and pay attention. And they make the world around us feel alive. It's not just a backdrop for action. It has its own secrets, its own rhythms, and its own hidden stories. And sometimes it feels like it's responding to our very presence. When it comes to the visuals of Half-Life 2, or any other game for that matter, I neither care to discuss nor wish to dwell on how modern a game appears, how graphically advanced it is, or what amazing cutting-edge technologies brought it to life. What truly matters to me is the atmosphere a game creates, the way it feels as you play it. The colors, the sounds, the interplay of light and shadow all contribute to an artful style, working as one. If one of the elements feels wrong, it could ruin the entire experience. Simply put, if you aim to make a horror game, for example, bright, cheerful colors and upbeat music would just feel out of place. Unless, of course, you have a severe fear of clowns. And please, don't misunderstand me. I hold no grudge against modern, visually stunning games. And thanks to advanced technologies, we now have games that verge on cinematic experiences. And certain aspect of visual design can indeed evoke stronger feelings, especially in character design and the advanced portrayal of believable emotional facial expressions. I'm also a fan of modern remakes, well, certain ones. Remakes of classic games tread a fine line. They often risk losing the magic of the original, becoming shadows of what they once were. In fact, videos on these topics are currently in the making, so stay tuned. Ultimately, I simply favor games that stir something within me over those that just dazzle visually yet offer little else, not to point fingers. And I'm willing to bet that many of you feel the same, given that you clicked on this video and are still here, hopefully. Feel free to discuss in the comments. Now that we have cleared that up, how is Half-Life 2 looking? Well, the game tackles heavy themes: oppression, enslavement, decay, isolation, transhumanism, and more. Yet, it also explores defiance, hope, and humanity's resilience. And the developers managed to visually portray these beautifully, keeping the overall art style grounded in realism, to match the serious tone of the narrative. Let's begin with the design of the alien-occupied City 17. It takes much of its inspiration from Eastern Europe, and no wonder. Many of the cities and structures there have experienced several occupations in real life, unfortunately. The beige, brown and sickly yellow colors of the decaying city and its radioactive outskirts clearly indicate that there is something rotten in this state of existence. Rotten, but quite beautiful at the same time. And speaking of rotten, the technology of the alien overlords, as their name suggests, is often this twisted combination of organic and mechanical parts, and neither of those elements appear healthy or polished. Especially the dark blues and blacks of their machines, which drip with depression and melancholy. In contrast, most of the bright colors are found among your allies, offering a touch of comfort and warmth during your moments of respite. The warm, cozy reds of Dr. Kleiner's lab, the vibrant hues of Eli's experiment in his hideout, and once the rebellion truly takes off, the cheerful yellow lambda symbols war-painted on the arms of your fellow freedom fighters. Also, I always thought that the game is very good, or at least better than other games, at portraying something unusual. Ironically, it includes some of the most beautifully decayed, destroyed, and rusted scenes I've ever seen. And what I find astonishing is, whenever I pass by an old unfinished structure or a ruined building, Half-Life 2 immediately comes to mind. Even after 20 years, I find myself comparing it to real-world scenes more than any other game. Please tell me I'm not the only one. Valve paid great attention to detail when it comes to the horrible elements of the game. In fact, they even used photos of an actual burnt body as textures for one of the corpse models, a detail I only learned a few months ago. I'm never looking at that thing the same again. Moving on, it utilizes light and shadow pretty well too. It knows how to employ bright lights to cast the player into the spotlight, while dark, shadowy corners keep the player on edge. And the interplay of light and shadow is developed even further. The game uses little tricks to enhance your sense of immersion, tension or relief visually, and one of them hides in the passage of day and night. There are essentially two chapters that evoke the deepest feelings of tension, fear or anxiety. In the chapter titled We Don't Go to Ravenholm, you must navigate a suburban area overrun by, well, basically zombies, and alien creatures that made human population into those zombies. This section serves as a chilling horror interlude, demonstrating just how dire the situation can become with the rabid alien pests. The other chapter, Nova Prospect, shifts to a more action thriller atmosphere, revealing the grim fate of many prisoners captured by the enemy overlords. And both of these chapters wisely unfold under the cover of night, deepening the sense of dread and unease. And though the developers took some liberties with continuity, it was the right choice. What do I mean by that? Well, these chapters are quite close to each other in the diurnal sense, with the night in Ravenholm lasting just an hour or two. Yet, there is perfectly pleasant sunny day between these chapters, and it is still daytime just before you approach Ravenholm as well. So the developers made a deliberate choice, sacrificing strict realism to create a more impactful atmosphere. I remember vividly reaching the end of Ravenholm chapter, desperately trying to escape the headcrab-infested mines, praying the horrors would finally end. And as I climbed toward the mine entrance, I saw a literal light at the end of the tunnel. And I felt relief, just by stepping into daylight at last. The game skillfully conveyed, with the quicker-than-usual end of nighttime, that the horror was done. You could pause, catch your breath, and feel a bit more at ease, knowing that the worst was behind you. Likewise, in Nova Prospect chapter, the atmosphere is crafted to feel desolate. It's a former prison repurposed into an interrogation camp. It would simply not have the same impact if, as you trudged through its halls, beams of sunlight poured through the cracked windows. Here, the nighttime setting, shadowed corridors, and dimly lit prison cells achieve their visual magic well. Moreover, the dark ambient soundtrack and echoing screams make this one of the most memorable sections of the game. And speaking of which, let's move on to my favorite aspect, the sound design. Look, I truly believe that you can find a flaw in anything, especially when it comes to a piece of art, which is deeply subjective. A movie, a book, a video game, nothing is truly perfect.
Except the sound in this game.
I swear to you, I've played this game at least 30 times and I cannot find a single sound that I don't either like, love, or feel belongs exactly where it is. All of it. And especially the voice acting, which breathes life and depth into each character. With great appreciation to Mike Shapiro, who beyond voicing Barney also brings life to the iconic G-Man. His work is truly remarkable. Every time G-Man speaks, it feels as though an alien is attempting to speak human for the very first time.
But I have agreed to abide by certain restrictions.
And then of course there is the music, brilliantly composed by Kelly Bailey. It perfectly complements the game's themes with dark synths, powerful and gentle beats, and carefully placed ambient tones. All combine to evoke an otherworldly feeling. If you want to learn more about the music of Half-Life, I recommend this great video here. But there are also heavy, unsettling sounds of the alien machinery, and even the simplest sounds like footsteps, a button press, or dropping of an item. Every single sound just fits. But we cannot forget the weapons. The crowbar swinging and striking, the pistol, the shotgun, the crossbow, the gravity gun. And the best sound of any weapon in any video game ever, the AR-2 pulse rifle. Pardon my unusual phrasing, but this thing slaps. I absolutely adore everything about it. The sound, the reload animation, the secondary fire that vaporizes enemies. It feels incredibly powerful to use and not to mention fun. I know the gravity gun is arguably one of the best weapons in any game, utilizing the game's excellent physics engine to make virtually anything into a weapon against your foes. But the AR-2 remains my favorite, primarily thanks to its powerful sound design. I mean, listen.
Ammunition depleted.
All in all, the sounds of Half-Life 2 are flawless, and I will die on that hill. The developers understood exactly when to play music to energize you, or to frighten you, or allow complete silence or soft ambience to give you a moment to breathe in the atmosphere, or take in the events that just transpired. The weapons sound powerful, intensifying the thrill of using them. The voice acting is top-notch, and every sound, whether interacting with the known world or alien, unfamiliar elements, feel authentic and satisfying. And with the visual style that looks good even today, almost everywhere, the game simply immerses you and you never want to let go of that beautiful, yet somehow sorrowful feeling, created by what you see and what you hear. The story of Half-Life 2, without giving away too much, is basically a dark and pretty simple sci-fi tale. It's filled with alien creatures, fantastical moments, sad and quiet scenes, and intense action sequences as you try to free Earth from the grip of the Combine oppressors. And like any good piece of science fiction, the core is about the human condition, our stubborn spirit, and our undying resolve to fight for freedom. The immediate goals are clear and easy to understand, while the bigger mysteries stay out of reach, sitting in the background. And even though the tone leans toward the darker side, it's balanced nicely by a cast of friendly, hopeful characters who feel grounded and determined. The main characters are great, and we'll get to them soon enough. But along the way you also meet several smaller characters whose short appearances still manage to add a lot to the game's themes. For example, isolation and despair are embodied in a desperate couple, holding on to each other when there is nothing else to hold on to. Madness, a natural response to this nightmarish reality, is witnessed in a stranger talking senselessly to himself. And of course, the whispers of rebellion can be heard and seen almost everywhere. They react to your approach, respond if you attempt conversation, and many of them aid in battle, healing you or sharing ammunition. These side characters, many with their unique dialogue and small gestures, left a lasting impression on me, becoming some of the most memorable NPCs I've met across many games. They simply feel remarkably alive, and the enemies are just as compelling, with their eerie radio chatter and chilling voices. Even out of combat, they shove and strike, asserting their dominance. And their reactions in a fight and the weight of their collapse make each encounter feel visceral. Even the flatline sound adds a touch of grim satisfaction when you take them down. Now turning to the main characters, some familiar faces return from the first game, including scientists Eli Vance and Dr. Kleiner, as well as Barney Calhoun, the protagonist of Blue Shift. And newcomers like Dr. Breen and Judith Mossman add fresh dynamics. They guide the story, deliver exposition, and move the plot forward effectively. Some even have their own quirks and fears.
Did you hear a cat just now?
No. And though not deep, the characters are far from simple archetypes. Dr. Breen, for instance, he's not your typical villain. He's a calculating strategist, using negotiation and manipulation to secure his power. Another example is Judith, who brings a twist to the story. She's not a conventional double agent. She's a scientist who, with an analytical mind and a touch of naivety, tried to do the right thing, only for it to backfire. Altogether, these qualities make the characters memorable and believable. However, the character who receives the most development and remains closest to you is Alex Vance, Eli's daughter. The iconic first meeting with Alex introduces several key aspects. Let's watch first before continuing.
Over here! Ha! No, you don't! Dr. Freeman, I presume. You better hurry. The Combine can be slow to wake, but once they're up, you don't want to get in their way. Dr. Kleiner said you'd be coming this way. I don't think it occurred to him that you might not have a map. I'm sure you don't remember me, though. Man, a few words, aren't you?
After only a few moments with her, we already understand a great deal about who she is. Alex is a fighter, fully capable of looking after herself as well after others. She is cautious and clever, unwilling to waste time talking, giving enemies a chance to recover. And with a touch of humor, she's also attentive and observant of you, even nodding with a smile that you are, as she puts it, a man of few words. And here, I must admit, the advanced facial animations, which still look great today, deepen the realism. It's difficult not to like Alex from the beginning. She's loving, helpful, and capable, serving as the game's anchor to humanity and morality, as well as Gordon's potential love interest. Plus, she has her own dog. Good boy. Yet, she's not all positives. Alex also reveals her flaws, specifically in her imperfect relationship with Judith, marked by a touch of jealousy. And like many of us, she can snap in anger, be overcome with anxiety and exhaustion, and occasionally display an awkward side.
Right? Zombine, get it? Okay.
And these qualities make her feel all the more real. And before I move on, I must commend all the voice actors, who have done an exceptional job here. Really well done. Now, through narrative and visual tools, the game reveals the enemy's horrific actions, the extent of their oppression, and the bleak future that awaits if no one resists. And as you witness this, the game also gradually presents opportunities to push back, seek payback, and start making a difference. And speaking of gradual, the game excels at introducing new equipment steadily throughout. Are you tired of the reliable yet unremarkable pistol and SMG? Here comes the most powerful handgun you could imagine. Do you find yourself in wide open spaces with enemies lurking far away? Here is a scoped weapon that lets you pin foes to the wall from a distance. Or perhaps you are weary of shooting altogether. Here is some bug bait, so you can unleash the alien pests to take down your enemies for you. And of course there is the gravity gun. With it, nearly anything you can pick up becomes a weapon. Catch a grenade thrown at you and fling it back? No problem. Slice a zombie clean in half with a saw blade propelled at high speed? Yes, please. Feel like launching a toilet at your enemy? Go right ahead. Using the gravity gun feels like nothing you have ever experienced before. It is truly next level fun. And while we are on the subject of the gravity gun, imagine this. As you progress, you gradually gather all the powerful, explosive and futuristic tools, everything you could ever need to face any challenge the game throws your way. After a few hours with no new weapons to wield, you approach the finale, and suddenly you are trapped. And your weapons are stripped away one by one. You watch helplessly as your entire repository is vaporized before your eyes. But there is one exception. The gravity gun remains unaffected. Almost. I remember feeling two conflicting things here. My hopeful, naive side believed that I would gradually reclaim some of my weapons before the final battle. Meanwhile, my cynical side thought that this was it, that I would simply wield the gravity gun until the end, with no more enemies to defeat, perhaps reflecting grenades or something like that. But then I picked it up, and man, was I wrong. The game flipped my expectations and supercharged the gun to unimaginable levels. I mean, look at it. It's so powerful it cannot even sit still. In that moment, you no longer felt like just a hero. You felt like a superhero, yet in a grounded, strangely believable way. You didn't drink a magic potion or grab a power-up. The game simply infused one of your weapons with alien technology, and within this universe, it felt entirely plausible. The gravity gun was fun instantly, but this little peak, which came out of nowhere, wasn't just fun. It was a moment of pure joyous carnage and overwhelming dominance. And it's of course thanks to the physics engine, which was genuinely revolutionary back in 2004. I mean, hell, it's still better than some engines in modern games. The physics engine is a big reason why the immersion works so well. The way it's integrated into every part of the game, from puzzles, combat, level design, to the sense of unprecedented realism in the world, is why so many people consider Half-Life 2 timeless. And coming from the skilled developers who made the original Half-Life, pacing of the game is also well crafted, with some subjective exceptions. After all, the game follows a fairly linear structure, allowing the devs complete control over when and where to place moments of silence, or when to immerse you in a thrilling action sequence, and when to place a meaningful story moment. What I wish to highlight here, though, is the game's thoughtful dispensing of puzzles and certain gameplay mechanics. See, when the game introduces a new mechanic or puzzle, it does so in a smart and respectful way. Let me give you two examples. First, a simple, commonly used mechanic, exploding barrels, and then a more complex one, automatic turrets. The first time you encounter an exploding barrel, the game doesn't spell out, "Hey, look how this thing explodes," with a forced cutscene, or an immersion-breaking hint icon. In fact, if you are not an experienced player, you might walk right by them obliviously. But only moments later, the game subtly demonstrates, rather than telling you with an obstructive hint, their use as enemies employ the barrels against you. Now you understand. And each time you choose to use this new mechanic, the game rewards you, whether with a brief spectacle or an easier way to handle multiple enemies. And on a side note, I do recognize that the game includes screen hints, yet they appear sparingly, subtly, and only in moments where they introduce a new control option, or in situations where an in-game demonstration might feel either redundant or out of place. Moving on to the turrets, or sentry guns if you prefer. They are introduced around the midpoint of the game. They appear sporadically after that, but only in the adjacent chapters, Nova Prospect and Entanglement, can they be used to your advantage. The first time you see them in action is well designed. At this point in the game, you command the Antlions, the alien creatures who have become your allies, and you watch them getting taken down by a single turret. You observe this from behind the turret, allowing you a moment to figure out how to approach it. You quickly realize that simply shooting it will be ineffective. The easiest way is to knock it over, and even if you're unsure how to handle the first one, moments later you witness your new alien companions knocking other turrets over, so now you definitely know how to deal with them. And sometime later, after you reunite with Alex, she warns you of incoming enemies, and you are now able to use the reprogrammed turrets to your advantage. By this stage, you know what they are, you understand how they work, so it's time to enjoy putting them to use. The first, tower defense section is straightforward, allowing you to learn how to position the turrets, gauge the damage they inflict, and observe their effectiveness against the Combine soldiers. The next two sections, where you can deploy the turrets, are far more challenging, pushing you to test what you have learned. But you may position the turrets as you please, scattering them apart, clustering them closely, or even carrying them forward from a previous defense section. And in a linear game like this, the freedom to approach this challenge in your own way feels both enjoyable and liberating. And that is a significant charm of the game's design, how it makes you feel as though you are discovering things on your own. Even though the developers subtly guide you, the sense of reward remains intact. And what do I mean by guide you? For example, take the gravity gun's ability to slice zombies in half with a saw blade. When you enter Ravenholm, the first blade you see is embedded in a wall with half a zombie still attached to its upper edge. Instinctively, you know what you want to try next. And while this subtle cue helps new players understand what is possible, it aligns seamlessly with the game's narrative, respects experienced players, and feels intuitive throughout. And this is similar with the puzzles. In those opening moments, the game subtly shows, and thus teaches you, that the objects in this world respond naturally. They have weight, they float, they interact. So when you face your first real puzzle, you begin to think as you would in the real world. I need to pivot here, lift this end by placing heavier objects on the other. Done, it works. And I emphasize this again, all of this unfolds without hints or external guidance. The game respects your intelligence, allowing you to engage and overcome obstacles independently. A sweet surge of dopamine from achieving something on your own. Every moment flows seamlessly, every character acts naturally, and the pacing is well maintained, coming together in these almost perfect rhythms. As I've mentioned before, nothing is truly perfect, so when discussing a game's shortcomings, I try to focus on aspects that are genuinely bothersome. Yet, when it comes to Half-Life 2, there are very few such issues. I mean, yes, the game is 20 years old and some may find it off-putting. It's also a very linear experience, which in this age of open-world games may not appeal to everyone. However, I'm willing to wager these factors matter little to most players. Maybe. So what are the truly negative elements here, if any? Well, one of the more vexing aspects that arises each time I play is the behavior of the friendly NPCs, particularly your fellow rebels. All too often they simply get in the way. The game offers a partial solution. You can direct your squad to move to a position you indicate. However, in the heat of a battle, especially within tight spaces, this can still prove frustrating. And though the pacing is generally well maintained, the driving section with the buggy lingers just a bit too long. It begins to feel repetitive after a time, lacking the exhilarating finale with the airboat and the chopper pursuit. In those final maps, I always find myself a bit weary of it. And while I mentioned the airboat, I will not list it here as a negative, even though I'm fully aware that some of you, maybe many of you, do not enjoy this chapter. And before you break your fingers violently typing out comments, let me explain. Most negative feelings about this chapter stem from the fact that the first half of your ride, before the machine gun is mounted, is frequently interrupted by obstacles. You ride, you stop, you ride, you stop, and so on. What I often hear is that these interruptions break the pacing. I must disagree, slightly. As I believe that good pacing involves a balance of frequent highs and lows. And by lows, I don't mean anything negative. Rather, I refer to the calmer moments that stand in contrast to the more intense ones. For example, the interplay between action and story beats, or between riding a vehicle and stopping to address challenges. I honestly find these pauses in the chapter enjoyable. They strike a nice balance to me, and because the combat and puzzles are engaging, I genuinely like this part of the game. Except for this one part. This part I hate with every cell of my body. Valve, you want to tell me that with all the excessive playtesting, no one had a problem with this part? Yeah, okay. I should probably continue before I get too worked up. Now, using my perspective on the pacing issue, I could make the same argument about the buggy chapter. It takes nearly the same amount of time to complete, and there are almost the same number of stops along the way, depending on how ruthlessly you'll drive. So why list the buggy section as a negative but not the airboat? Well, for me, the reason lies in the aforementioned chopper pursuit. Without it, both chapters would feel nearly identical, and I would find them both somewhat repetitive. The chopper introduces that extra element needed to make the experience more engaging. It's not just a presence that adds urgency and suspense to the chapter, it also elicits feelings of retribution and triumph. The former is experienced most vividly the moment you open fire on the chopper with its own gun mounted on your airboat. That is a truly satisfying moment, a sweet, sweet feeling seeing the chopper panic, its alarms blaring, as it never expected you to shoot back from your little airboat. And the feeling of triumph comes to fruition in the final battle with the chopper. That climactic showdown is precisely what the buggy section lacks. I mean, you just park the thing in a garage and that's it. Before it gets stolen from you, that is. The concluding moments with the airboat feel much more like a proper resolution. You destroy the very thing that has been relentlessly pursuing you, make one last dramatic leap over an obstacle, and bid farewell in a stunning sunset vista. Of course, this is simply my perspective, and if you do not enjoy the airboat segment, I completely understand. As they say, whatever floats your boat. Moving on, one of the small negatives from a narrative perspective that I find quite overindulged is the fact that almost everyone you meet seems not only to know you,
well, Gordon Freeman.
Dr. Freeman, you're Freeman, aren't you?
but also to place you on an overly shiny pedestal.
With you here, Dr. Freeman, we can finally make some headway.
As I mentioned, the game does an excellent job of making you feel like a hero, which is one of the most enjoyable aspects of being a video game protagonist. However, I feel it is taken a little too far here. The game's setting and overall plot are mature, dark, and somewhat realistic, But the fact that almost everyone treats you as some kind of mystical savior after you return, 20 years later, feels too idealized. It is understandable that survivors of Black Mesa would tell others about your success in stopping the Zen invasion, and that your name would be remembered. However, in a more realistic scenario, there would be likely people who would not care, and even some who would blame you for all the misery that has followed. In a dark sci-fi narrative, a grounded approach to character interactions is important to match the tone, and most characters here achieve that, just not when it comes to you. I believe this issue could have been easily addressed with the addition of 1 or 2 side characters. Imagine, for instance, a rebel character who was Alex's former love interest. After you appear and Alex begins to grow closer to you, this character could serve as a contrast to everyone else who immediately treats Gordon as their hero. This would add greater authenticity to the character dynamics and create opportunities for tension or deeper integration with the game's notorious twist, or anything else. There's a lot of ways you can spin a character like that. That said, this is only a minor gripe, and the episodes do somewhat address this issue, particularly through Dr. Magnuson's character, who is notably not overly fond of you.
Freeman, you're not doing anything. Make yourself useful and find out what the hell is going on in there.
Another minor gripe I have is the fact that the game is not that challenging, even on hard mode. There are a few segments where it will kick your behind mercilessly, but compared to the original, it's relatively easy to complete. Now, do not get me wrong. I am not one of those people who feel every game needs to be vein-poppingly hard. My opinion is that if you simply want to have fun with a game and play it on the easiest difficulty, you absolutely should. We all experience games differently, and it is ultimately about that. Having fun, that is. Developers understand this well, which is why difficulty options exist in the first place. However, my issue is that the difference between this and this is not very significant, favoring the easier option. The game tends to be far more forgiving when it comes to combat, especially compared to the original Half-Life. The enemies themselves are not the problem, they are challenging enough. The real issue lies in the excessive amount of healing the game provides. There are far too many health and energy stations, and health packs are everywhere. Hard difficulty should be hard, not just slightly inconvenient. Speaking of which, one small change I always thought would be pretty cool, a bit more realistic and a bit more challenging, would be a little tweak for the poison head crabs. Normally, if a poison head crab lands a successful hit on you, your HP immediately drops to 1. Then, with the help of your trusty HEV suit, it slowly regenerates almost back to full, leaving only a small amount of damage, presumably from the bite itself, not the poison. And it doesn't matter if you play on easy or hard difficulty, the mechanic stays the same. The really boring part is that you can just stay in one place and wait for your health to regenerate, as I imagine most people do. And that is just not fun at all. Now imagine if it worked the other way around. If the head crab bit you, you would lose only a small amount of HP right away, but then start losing more bit by bit as time went on. You know, the way most poisons work. It takes a while to spread and kill you. This would introduce a new sense of urgency to the gameplay. You would want and need to find a health pack as soon as possible, before your HP dropped to 1. You could even have it so that on easy mode, the health pack slowly regenerated you back to full, like it does now. But on hard mode, the health pack would just stop the poison from draining your health any further, leaving you with whatever HP you had when you finally used it. This change would not just make the poison head crabs feel more natural, if you can say that about alien creature, it would also add an extra layer of tension that scales with difficulty options. In some games, these options serve as a replayability feature, and it can be enjoyable to see how differently the game plays at various difficulty levels, or to, challenge yourself if you really like the gameplay. Here though, the differences are almost entirely ineffectual. The other most common criticisms I hear, and which may dampen some players' enjoyment, are the lack of variety in enemies and weapons. Personally though, this has never troubled me. While it is true that there are fewer weapons to choose from than in, say, the previous game, this is balanced beautifully by the gravity gun. And as for the enemies, they remain challenging, especially on hard mode. And I do not need 100 enemy types, as long as the few available are well placed throughout the experience, do not overstay their welcome, and are fun to defeat.
Headshot.
While I respect opposing opinions on this matter, I have never felt that the game needed more variety in its foes, so I find it difficult to see this as a genuine flaw. No, for me, the greatest disappointment does not come from the game itself, but from its creator, Valve. When this game concludes, it does so on a cliffhanger, a choice that not only divided the audience, but left us yearning to know more, to see where the story would go next, to find out what became of the characters. And this might not have been such a flaw were it not for the ensuing silence from Valve. See, after Half-Life 2, promises were made. We were to receive 3 episodes in quick succession, bringing the current story to a close before Valve would embark on Half-Life 3. Time went on, and indeed, after Half-Life 2, we received Episode 1 just 2 years later, followed by Episode 2 the year after that. Episode 1 felt more like an additional chapter of Half-Life 2 than a game in its own right, and Episode 2, while introducing a few new enemy types and shifting the setting from City 17 to the more open forested areas nearby, only advanced the story a little further. And it ended on an arguably even more dramatic cliffhanger than Half-Life 2 itself. And while they were fun to play, they were merely continuations of Half-Life 2, so the feelings they elicited did not really evolve. They simply remained the same. And then it arrived. The Great Silence. Years passed, and Episode 3, which was meant to conclude the story and the episodic format, faded slowly from conversation. All we received were a few pieces of concept art, and that was all. It took 13 long years before another Half-Life game, Half-Life Alyx, appeared. 13 years of waiting and hoping. Even now, I cannot help but feel sad. It was a long time. Too long. Many fans were not as lucky as we were. Many did not live to see today. Not only for a resolution to the story, but for the chance to experience another game that felt like no other. And while Half-Life Alyx is a fun game, it requires a VR setup to play, and it takes the form of a prequel, ending where Episode 2 did, altering the story but leaving it unresolved. And maybe Half-Life 3 will come out before I finish this video, or maybe Valve will announce it with a trailer or something. It really doesn't matter to me anymore, because my point will still stand. You do not create a captivating, story-driven video game that captures the hearts of millions of fans all over the world, and then just leave them, well, abandoned for more than a decade. That is just devastatingly disappointing. And yes, you could look at this with a more cynical view and argue that Valve does not owe us anything, and that Half-Life is just a product. And I would say that you are right. But I would also argue that there is another side to the coin. We invested not only our money, but also our time and our emotions into that product. Because it is not just a product. It's a piece of creative art. And it's because of Half-Life and because of our love and lust for it that Valve grew to the profitable and successful size it is now. Sure, Steam is the biggest thing they created, but there would be no Steam without Half-Life. Also, Valve did not fail to finish the story due to any financial problems, critical failure, or technical issues. They did not finish it because of perfectionism and the senseless need to bring innovation where it was neither needed nor wanted at the time. See, where other developers spew out games year after year, most of them mediocre, Valve is on the opposite end of the spectrum, taking their time, waiting for the right spark of motivation, I suppose. A couple of years ago, I would absolutely have said that I would rather wait for a good game than get a mediocre one. But now, I would rather have closure than a good game. And what I fear the most is that in a few more years, I will simply stop caring at all. And so to me, the greatest flaw of Half-Life 2 lies in the unfulfilled promise of its continuation. I will probably not create a separate video about the episodes that follow Half-Life 2 because, as I've mentioned, they feel more like continuations than true sequels. And much of the sentiments remain unchanged. They retain the same audiovisual style, which is really enjoyable to lose yourself in, but introduce very few new feelings to discuss. Episode 1, picking up directly where Half-Life 2 ended, focuses on two main aspects: developing Alex as a character, both her individual growth and the relationship between her and the player, and getting both of you out of the remnants of City 17. Unfortunately, these are also the most notable positives I can mention. The game is quite short, and while a few levels are genuinely enjoyable, it can be completed in just 3 to 4 hours, leaving little time to introduce any new sensations. I enjoy revisiting Episode 1 primarily for the delightful banter with Alex. She was already a vivid and engaging presence in Half-Life 2, but Valve truly surpassed themselves here. She feels more responsive than ever, displaying a broader range of emotions and reacting with remarkable lifelike detail to even the smallest moments.
Thanks.
This shines, most in the chapter Lowlife, where you desperately fight your way through shadowy underground tunnels and eerie parking lots, relying almost entirely on your flashlight to pierce the darkness.
We've really got to talk to Dr. Kleiner about getting a new battery for that flashlight.
Alex reacts in wonderfully human ways, shielding her eyes if you shine the flashlight in her face, asking you to point it at enemies so she can aim,
Shine your light on that barnacle.
and even showing fear if you leave the light off for too long.
Don't leave me here!
It is no surprise she is featured on the cover of this title. Valve took a character I already liked and made her even more engaging. Beyond this, there is not much more to say. While Alex is a joy, there's just nothing new here. The finale feels underwhelming and the entire experience is over far too quickly. On the other hand, Episode 2 felt much more like a complete package, presenting the most new elements. It introduces a handful of fresh enemy types and a few delightful new mechanics. Yet, most significantly, it carried Half-Life 2 beyond the confines of City 17 and its outskirts, while weaving a gentle continuation of the characters and their unfolding journeys. From the moment it begins, Episode 2 feels like a breath of fresh air. The change in the environment marks a significant shift in the series' visual identity, and by this point it was really needed. And as you stand before a stunning vista of the ruined citadel, the world of Half-Life suddenly feels far larger. And it's not just the world that grows larger. The stakes rise dramatically when Alex is gravely injured in the opening chapter, establishing an urgent, dramatic and thrilling tone that carries throughout the entire episode.
If we lose her, we lose all.
With the great Valvean game design working in overdrive, the developers managed to weave an impressive array of experiences into just 2 chapters. A pivotal story moment, an expansion of established lore, esoteric exploration, a heart-pounding chase sequence, several satisfying puzzles, and a gripping action segment, all seamlessly packed together. Truly a testament to level design efficiency. There are a few quiet, serene moments, but action is much more prominent this time, and with it comes an outstanding new soundtrack. My favorite in the entire series. The combat sequences would feel half as impactful without these remarkable new tracks, where powerful guitar riffs boldly drive the pace, intensifying the experience remarkably. Compared to Episode 1, this installment also moves the story forward, if only by a small measure. It resolves certain threads while introducing new questions. And as I mentioned before, it concludes once again on a cliffhanger. This time slightly more satisfying, but still leaving us yearning for more. Despite all the new elements, it still feels more like a continuation of Half-Life 2 than a true sequel. Or more precisely, it feels like the point where Half-Life 2 should have ended, at least from the story perspective. The ending here feels much more complete. So to me, when discussing or reflecting on Half-Life 2, I consider both episodes as part of it, not separate games. And I believe that if Valve ever decides to release an updated version of Half-Life 2, perhaps using the new Source 2 engine or some sort of anniversary edition, the episodes will undoubtedly be included. Oh, would you look at that. So why was Half-Life 2 the first game to make me feel more? Well, it is because of all the points I have raised thus far. It's lighthearted and serious in all the right places, and it's set in an intriguing sci-fi dystopian world. It knows how to walk that fine line between believable realism and fun fantastical set pieces, with relatable and engaging characters. Or at least one of them. The shortcomings of the game are few, and they are easily forgiven in the face of its many strengths. The pacing flows almost perfectly, drawing you in with each passing moment, leaving you eager to move forward to see what comes next. No element feels out of place or overused. Everything in the game, from what you see to what you hear, tugs at the right emotional strings, creating an experience that resonates on an intense level. It is a game that strikes a delicate balance, simple and accessible, yet rich with layers of depth, proving that video games can be so much more than mere uninspiring entertainment. It all comes together into a work of art, a game that feels timeless and leaves an enduring impact. And for me, most importantly, just like the first game, it draws you deeply into its world by placing you in the shoes of a silent protagonist. With no cutscenes, no visual interruptions, you are there in the moment, and you decide who you want to pay attention to, where you want to stand in a scene, and how you want to approach almost anything. You react to everything in real time, and so you feel the urgency of the unfolding events. All this enhances the sense of realism and continuity. And if you ask me, it's the crowned achievement of this franchise and of Half-Life 2 especially. The way it presents everything in it, right before your eyes, seamlessly. So that is the biggest reason why it was the first game to make me feel something more. It grips you from the very beginning, submerging you completely in its world and every moment it offers. From the first steps you take through the besieged city, to the first oppressed citizen you save in the decayed canals, from the horrors you endure in Ravenholm, to the exhilarating freedom of riding along open coastlines, from the intense battles in the city streets, to the eventual destruction of the Citadel and its inhabitants. Every effort building toward one goal, humanity's freedom. You do not merely play it, you feel as though you are truly there, immersed in arguably one of the greatest games ever made, engaging in this adventure of yours, in this silent heroism of Half-Life 2. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. I hope I managed to elicit something in you. Even if it was just a tiny smirk, I'll take it. But seriously, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, subscribe, and that bell thing would be appreciated. And if you really liked it, there is a Patreon link in the description. There, I release videos early, without ads. And since this is actually the first video I worked on, there's something I want to say. I know it's not perfect, but I loved making it and I learned a lot. And what I mean is that if you stick around, I promise I will keep improving and do my best to make each video better than the last. So, if you plan to stay, I'm looking forward to seeing you here. Take care, and in the meantime, play with heart.